Brown paper is my favourite junk journaling supply. You can get loads of it for free from packaging in all different shades and textures, and it's so versatile for transforming into interesting background papers. So I'm going to show you some of my favourite ways for doing that, and it's perfect whether you want to bind them as full pages in journals or just use them as background pieces. So the first technique we're going to do is mark making, and you don't need any fancy supplies for this, just your creativity, because the possibilities are truly endless when it comes to the different mark making you can make on the brown papers. It's a bit like making your own scrapbook papers even. So here I've just used some white acrylic paint, but here are some other colours that I also really like to use on the brown paper to make it pop. And I've just used a cardboard tube here, as you can see, just to press and make some marks onto the papers. Nothing precise or anything like that, and it just creates a really cool effect as a background paper. You can also just use a paintbrush and make some like splotchy marks. Nothing precise, it just creates a really cool effect. And you can also do stamping as well. So my favourite way to stamp onto brown paper is to use a brown ink. So the one I've used is like a vintage sort of sepia tone, and I think this goes really nicely with the brown paper and the different effects that you can create with it. So what I like to do is just use any of my stamps really and just stamp in a repeating pattern. So I find this is quite good actually if you've got some stamps and you know when you feel like you're constantly just using the same stamp and you're getting a little bit bored of it, transforming it into its own little background piece just gives you a really fresh perspective on the stamp itself, and you can then use that as a background paper. So it's quite therapeutic to just do the stamping, and then as you can see here it looks completely different here as a background piece for a journal page. And even if your stamping isn't precise like this one, the stamps didn't come out really clear, it's still got quite a grungy effect. And don't just think about what you can add to your papers, but also what you can take away. So creating cutout details onto your brown paper can give a really nice contrasting effect with whatever is then underneath the papers. So of course you could do this with a stencil and then a craft knife. But you can also use your punches here as I'm showing you to create some interesting strips. So it's a little bit like the faux washi concept, except we've got some cutout details here. So I just did a row of stars, and you'll be left with some really interesting details on these collage strips, which look really nice layered on top of different papers as I'm showing you here. There are so many different ways you can take this concept, and of course the pieces that you've punched out as well, don't forget to save them for your collage too. So our next way of upcycling brown paper packaging into some truly one-of-a-kind collage materials for our junk journals is jelly printing. Now, if you've been watching my recent videos, you guys know that I've been starting to learn how to use my jelly plate, which is why I'm excited to share that this video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, productivity, and so many more. And they can really help you take skills and hobbies to the next level. So I've been taking Froyle Davis's class called Expressive Mark Making with Jelly Printing and Collage, and it's been perfect for going through the basics, discovering all the different techniques that I can experiment with, and also to follow along with her on the process, because Skillshare's got a learn by doing approach, which is really great as a beginner because I can follow along with the projects that are in the classes. And jelly printing is such a fun way to create unique collage papers, and I can't wait to use the prints that I've made on my brown papers in my junk journals as unique backgrounds and as embellishments. You can join me on this creative learning adventure this summer. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. And as you can see, I went ahead and made quite a few jelly prints on the brown papers. I think one of the things about jelly printing in particular is that it's just like so addictive. Like once you actually get all your materials set up and you've got your paints and all the papers, you just keep like making like loads of prints. Like I actually ran out of space because I was trying to sort of lay them flat around me like on my desk, and I had them on the floor to make sure that I didn't get paint anywhere, but I was using two colours for this, so I decided to use like a Titan buff and a sort of Payne's grey, and I love the colour combination of these. I've used them in different things before, so when I've had my sketchbooks, I've loved using them as a colour palette for flowers. If I can find the sketch I did for that, I'll insert a clip here because I just really love this colour combination, and I think it really pops on the like craft brown paper as well. So that's something to think about when you're using the brown paper, is that you can really play with the different color combinations that you can come up with, because unlike just printing or like painting onto plain paper, like plain white, the craft really gives a nice tone and contrast to different colors. So things like white would really pop, of course, onto the brown as well. And I think the good thing as well is that like you don't need to worry about creating something perfect with these, like, and this goes for like any of the techniques that we're looking at in this video, because these are only going to be background pieces. So you know, I'll end up like tearing these up and only using certain sections, so you can really just be free to play around with the different patterns and the different textures that you can create with your brown paper, ready to then use them as collage papers in lots of different ways within your junk journals. So I'm really excited to use these prints and see what I can create with these patterns, and I really love the stencil one there as well. Now, not all brown paper was created equally, so what can we do when there's text on it? Now, you can still use it, and what I like to do is use my trusty collage to cover up the parts that I don't want to see. So you can see here there's some like text and branding on this. So what I'm going to do is take some paper scraps, so I've got like book pages, also some thinner things like tissue paper would work well for this as well, and I'm just going to lay this on the top. So I'm going to focus on the areas that have the text and the writing and things, to cover those up, and then I will leave some areas of the brown paper to shine through. So we're not doing like a full-on collage masterboard where you would cover the entire sheet of paper with your collage. This is kind of leaving areas to shine through from the brown paper. So we're just working with what we've got here. You know, I've got this Amazon packaging and I can never seem to get rid of it. Let me know down below if you're the same with hoarding all these papers. Because I just seem to think, oh, I'll use that in something. So I don't even know how long I've had this. It's one of those like paper bag mailers. And so I decided that I would use this piece to show you how you can work with your papers to, you know, get rid of the things that you don't want to see, but still have something really cool to show on your collage papers. So I'm using some neutral tones here because I think it really contrasts nicely with the brown paper. You can see here I've also got like a thinner book page here, so I'm turning it round to use the side that has no writing on it as well, just to add a little bit of contrast. And in some cases you can kind of see some of the text showing through, but it's almost a bit of interest at that point, like you can't really tell what it is. So you can use whatever papers you'd like to start building up this base that we've got, and then I'm going to show you how I've then added in lots of different like textural elements to add some details and make it more of a mixed media piece, because essentially I'm throwing all my art supplies at this except the kitchen sink. Like you can use whatever. I end up using stitched elements and inks and crayons and paint, and you know, the list is endless. You can use whatever you want. I think that brown paper, when it's like this in a paper mailer, is quite sturdy, so it can kind of put up with a lot. So it's perfect for mixed media collaging. Now, this you could cut it into strips and have it be like that faux washi effect. You could just use sections of it and have it be maybe like a background piece, or I mean, even if you cut it the edges off, you could just have this as like a finished piece. Like you could just bind this as a page into your journal then to work on. But the thing that I'm thinking about is potentially you could even just use this as a cover because it's quite a big piece. If I just folded this in half, I think it would work really nicely as a journal cover itself. And then you could bind papers into it. So there's lots of different things that you can do with your brown papers to really have different effects within your journals. So you can see here I'm adding some different colours as well. So I've got that like pink decoupage paper that I added. I've also got a white like PET tape that is a really nice contrast onto the brown paper. And then I've also got this, it's not quite vellum, it's a little bit thinner, but it's not quite tracing paper. So I'm not quite sure what material this is, but it's just from a paper pack, and I thought it had a really nice effect over the top of the collage that I had added to this brown paper. And look at the only word that I left from the original paper. I didn't even intend to leave just the word packaging, so I thought that was really funny and quite fitting for this piece. So I decided to leave it and not cover it up. You've just sort of got the collage framing it there on the left hand side. Now I'm coming in with some acrylic paint. This is the titanium buff that I was using earlier on the jelly printing. I think that this colour scheme just goes really nicely with the brown paper, so I'm adding some different like splotches and also just generally adding it as different like patches almost. I'm using it to overlay between the papers and the brown paper to help to give a little bit of cohesion and sort of blend everything together. So rather than just say if I had a collage piece and I just like put a splotch in the middle of the paper, it would look a little bit odd. Whereas if you put it overlapping one piece and another, that really helps to bridge that gap and adds that cohesion. I'm also coming in here with my inks and just doing some leaf patterns. I love doing these and I think they have such a cool effect on the brown paper as well. So I've just added a few of those over the top of the collage and then just some scribbly marks as well, because I was thinking about also whether I could cut this up. So I wanted to give myself some options for how I could use this. So adding all of the little details in different sections really gives you some versatility when it comes to how you can actually then use this. And you can see here I'm just sort of debating and deciding where to add this peachy neo colour crayon to this piece as well. I think it really pops on the brown paper, and so it's a nice contrast with all of the neutral tones that I've got going on. So there's just some scribbles and mark making. I think the fun thing about this is you really don't have to be like precise and worry about what it's going to look like, especially if you do end up cutting this up. You're not going to notice all these different things. You'll sort of hone in on the different areas of detail. And then for my last area of detailing and texture, I wanted to add some stitching. I've never really tried this like collage masterboard technique and also adding hand stitching, so it felt a little bit like I got carried away and was just working on like a journal page in and of itself. But I think adding these little crisscrosses here added a nice textural element, so that's definitely something that I want to play with more in creating these like mixed media collages on my brown paper, is to look at how I can add like stitched elements as well, because I really like the way that they look with all the other collage and mark making that I've got going on, because it's almost a little bit like mark making in and of itself, like the crisscrosses, except that you're just using some needle and thread. So I just used a pale pink here and I think it gave a really nice touch to the piece. So I hope you enjoyed all these different ways that you can level up your brown paper, and I hope you have fun with mark making on your junk journaling supplies.